In this house, the person everyone underestimated became the one who turned the entire family upside down.
My rich aunt left me $5 million. The parents who abandoned me at a bus station 20 years ago suddenly showed up at the will reading. They told the lawyer I was mentally unstable and that they were filing for a conservatorship to protect me and my inheritance. They smirked, thinking they had me cornered. They didn't know my aunt had left me one last secret weapon. It wasn't money, it was a little black notebook. And the moment my lawyer opened it, their smug smiles disappeared forever. Before I tell you what was in that notebook, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. And if you have ever had to fight family for what is rightfully yours, please hit that like button and subscribe. You will not want to miss what happens next. The air in Mr. Henderson's office was thick and heavy. It smelled like old books, expensive leather, and stale grief. My grief. I sat in a chair that felt too big for me, my black funeral dress itching against my skin. I was 28 years old, and the only person who ever loved me in this world was gone. I felt numb, hollowed out like a building after a fire. All the important parts were just ash. The room itself was impressive, I guess. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Atlanta skyline, but all I saw was a gray, indifferent sky. The walls were lined with degrees and certifications, a testament to Mr. Henderson's success. But none of it mattered. The silence in the room was a heavy blanket. Across the massive mahogany desk, Mr. Henderson looked at me with kind, sad eyes. He wasn't just my Aunt Rosetta's lawyer. He was her best friend. He was an older, distinguished African-American man, his graying hair perfectly shaped, and his suit was perfect, even if the day was not. He had known me since I was 8, ever since my aunt had found me terrified and filthy at that bus station, and brought me into her life. He was family in a way my real family never was. He had been there for my high school graduation. He had advised me when I started my own small digital strategy firm. He was a safe place. He cleared his throat, his voice deep and gentle, a stark contrast to the harshness of my grief. I know this is hard, Chani. Rosetta. She was a remarkable woman, more than just a client to me. She was a sister. I tried to nod. My throat felt thick with cement. I couldn't find any words. I just stared at the single framed photo on his desk, him and Aunt Rosetta at a charity gala, both of them laughing, alive and vibrant. A fresh wave of pain hit me. She loved you fiercely. He continued, seeming to understand my silence. She was so proud of the woman you became. Your business, your strength. She saw all of it. She talked about you constantly. He placed his steady, dark hand on a thick, leather-bound folder that sat between us. It looked ancient, important. She was also meticulous. She knew this day would come. She loved you so much, Chani, that she prepared for it. She prepared for, well, for everything. I knew what everything meant. It meant them. The people who shared my blood, but not my life. The people who hadn't called, written, or even sent a single text message in 20 years. A cold dread, separate from my grief, began to creep into my stomach. I just wanted this to be over. I wanted to go back to my aunt's empty house in the Collier Heights neighborhood, crawl into her bed and sleep for a week. The silence in that house was deafening, but it was my silence. It was safe. Aunt Rosetta had made it safe. "We will make this quick," Mr. Henderson said softly, as if reading my mind. "I know you need to rest. We just have to get through the legal necessities." He put on his reading glasses. The room was deathly quiet. I could hear the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the corner, a sound that usually comforted me, but now just sounded like time running out. I could hear the sound of my own pulse drumming in my ears. He opened the folder. The sound of the thick, expensive paper sliding open was loud in the silence. "I, Rosetta James." He began, his voice clear and formal, taking on the official tone of his profession. "Being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." Slam! The office door burst open. It didn't just open, it was thrown slamming against the interior wall with a crack that made me jump so hard my teeth clicked together. My heart leaped into my throat, pounding like a trapped bird. All the air was sucked out of the room. And then I heard it. A sound I hadn't heard in 2 decades, but my body remembered it instantly. A sound my nightmares were made of. The sharp, aggressive, entitled click-clack-click of expensive high heels on a polished hardwood floor. A sound that always meant that my world was about to be torn apart. Althea stepped into the room, and all the warmth was sucked out with her. She was 48, but her face was a tight, smooth mask, pulled back by expensive procedures. She was poured into a black designer suit that must have cost a fortune, her light skin a stark contrast to the dark fabric. Her nails were long red and looked like claws. She looked like she was attending a business merger, not a reading of a will for a sister she hadn't seen in 2 decades. Behind her, Marcus, my biological father, filled the doorway. He was 50 tall and broad, wearing a vest and a silk tie. He looked polished and successful, but his eyes, unlike hers, were nervous. They darted from me to Mr. Henderson, and then, most telling of all, to the thick leather folder on the desk. Mr. Henderson, ever the professional, stiffened. His voice became pure steel. "Excuse me, this is a private meeting. Do you have an appointment?" Althea ignored him. She didn't even glance his way. Her eyes locked onto me, and that perfectly smooth, cold face cracked into a wide, brilliant smile. It was all teeth. It was the fakest thing I had ever seen. "Chani, baby," she cooed, her voice high and syrupy. She lunged forward, her arms spread wide, her expensive perfume hitting me a second before she did. "Oh, look at you, all grown up. It's us. Mommy and Daddy are here." A raw, primal scream tore itself from my throat. "Don't!" I scrambled backward, pushing my heavy leather chair away from her. It screeched horribly against the polished wood floor, a sound that matched the alarm bells in my head. "Don't you touch me!" Everything stopped. The room was frozen. Althea's arms were still outstretched, her smile frozen in that fake, loving expression. But her eyes. For one split second I saw it. Pure, unadulterated rage. The mask had slipped. She was furious that I had defied her, that I had embarrassed her in front of the lawyer. Then just as quickly the mask was back. Her face crumpled into a mask of theatrical wounded sadness. She slowly lowered her arms. "Chani, honey," she said, her voice dripping with false hurt. "Don't be like that. We know you're grieving. We know this is a shock. We're just here to support you. We're your parents." My voice was shaking, but it was cold. I could feel the adrenaline, a cold fire spreading through my veins. "You haven't answered my question," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "What are you doing here?" Althea looked offended, as if I had no right to ask. She opened her mouth, but Marcus stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. He was trying to look like the calm, reasonable one. "We are here," he said, his voice a deep, authoritative rumble, "to hear the will of my sister Rosetta. We are, after all, family." I laughed. The sound was ugly, a short, sharp bark of pain that had nowhere else to go. It startled even me. "Family." I repeated the word, tasting like poison in my mouth. "You want to use that word now?" I stood up, my legs shaking but holding me. I looked straight into Althea's eyes. "You haven't been family for 20 years. Not since the day you drove me to the downtown Greyhound bus station. Not since you put a crumpled $20 bill in my hand, told me to sit on the bench and wait for someone. I was 8 years old. You never came back." "That was a complete misunderstanding." Althea snapped, her voice losing its syrupy tone and becoming sharp, defensive. "We were in a bad place. We looked for you. We tried to find you. You looked for me," I said, my voice rising. "That is the biggest lie you have ever told. Aunt Rosetta found me 3 days later, hiding in a bathroom stall. She adopted me. Legally. She sent you the court papers. She sent you our new address." She sent you our phone number. You never called. Not once. Not for a single birthday. Not for one Christmas. Not when I graduated high school. Not when I graduated college. But now my aunt is dead. And you're here. So I'll ask you again. What are you doing here? That is quite enough, Mr. Henderson said, his voice a command. He looked at Althea and Marcus. You are not on the guest list. In fact, Miss James specifically stipulated in her instructions that you were not to be present. I must ask you to leave. Marcus didn't even look at him. He just smiled a thin, cold smile. He stepped forward, moving past Althea closer to the desk, and his eyes were not on me, the daughter he was so happy to see. They were glued to the thick leather-bound folder on Mr. Henderson's desk, the will. We're not going anywhere, Marcus said, his voice smooth as oil. We're here for my sister's will, and we are here for our daughter. Mr. Henderson looked from Marcus's smug face to Althea's impatient one. He looked at me, his eyes full of concern. I gave him a small, firm nod. Read it. I wanted this over. He sighed a heavy, frustrated sound and sat back down. He visibly disliked their presence, but he was a professional. He picked up the will. Very well, he said, his voice clipped and cold. Let us continue. He put his glasses back on and began to read, his voice a formal, steady drone. He skipped past the preliminary legal language, past the small, kind donations Aunt Rosetta had left for her local church, for the animal shelter where she found her cat, and for a scholarship fund she'd set up at her old high school. Althea was practically vibrating with impatience. She started tapping her long red fingernails on the leather armrest of her chair. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was sharp, rhythmic, a tiny hammer chipping away at the heavy silence in the room. It was the only sound besides Mr. Henderson's voice. Marcus just sat there, leaning forward, his body coiled like a snake, his eyes fixed on the document in Mr. Henderson's hand. He was listening to every single word. Mr. Henderson turned a page. The slight rustle of the thick paper made me jump. He paused as if bracing himself. And now? He said, his voice softening slightly as he read my aunt's words. For the remainder of my entire estate. This includes but is not limited to my primary residence in the Collier Heights neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia. All of its contents, my art collection, and all liquid assets, stocks, bonds, and cash, held in all bank and investment accounts. Althea stopped tapping. The air in the room became thin. I held my breath. With a total estimated value, Mr. Henderson continued, of $5 million. I saw Marcus's eyes widen. A hungry, satisfied smile flickered on his lips, a flash of victory before he schooled his features back into a mask of serious concern. Mr. Henderson took a deep final breath before reading the last part. I leave all of it in its entirety without question and without condition. To my beloved niece, the woman I have always considered my daughter in my heart, Chani Brooks. The room was silent. $5 million. It wasn't a number. It was a shield. It was a fortress. It was a lifetime of my aunt's hard work, her love, her belief in me, all condensed into a legal sentence. I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred as the tears I had been fighting all day finally burned my eyes and spilled over hot and fast down my cheeks. It wasn't joy. It was heavy. It was the crushing weight of her final act of love. The silence was shattered by a high-pitched shriek. Ha ha ha! Althea threw her head back and laughed. It was a cold, sharp, ugly sound that echoed off the expensive wood-paneled walls. It was a sound of disbelief and ridicule. $5 million, she cackled, pointing a long, red-nailed finger directly at me. To her? She looked at Mr. Henderson as if he were insane. The old woman really had lost her mind. This girl. She said the word like it was an insult. Can't even take care of herself. She's a child. She's a mess. She's probably already in debt. The rage came so fast it almost choked me. I am 28 years old, I said, my voice low and shaking. I run my own business. And you will not talk about me like I am not in this room. A business? Marcus sneered, his voice full of fake pity. You mean your little computer blog? He stood up slowly, a predator unfolding. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at Mr. Henderson, and that smug, triumphant smile was back wider this time, full of confidence. He had been waiting for this exact moment. That, he said, his voice smooth and dangerous, is precisely why we are here. Marcus signaled to Althea. It was a small, sharp gesture, a movement they had clearly rehearsed. Althea, her face a mask of fake concern, reached into her oversized, expensive Hermes bag. She pulled out a thick, manila folder, the kind used for legal documents, and slapped it down on Mr. Henderson's polished desk. The sound was loud and final. "What is that?" I asked. My voice was small, but the dread was growing cold and heavy in my stomach. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was heavy, possessive, not comforting. I flinched, but he didn't let go. "Chani, darling," he said, his voice dripping with fake pity. "You have always been sensitive, ever since you were a little girl, always a little unstable." I recoiled, ripping my shoulder out from under his hand as if his touch was acid. "Get your hand off me," I hissed. Althea sighed, a long, theatrical sound of a mother at the end of her rope. "You see," she said, appealing to Mr. Henderson, "so emotional, so agitated. It's just like we told you. Your aunt's death has obviously been a terrible shock. A huge sum of money like this, it's too overwhelming for someone like you. You need guidance. You need your parents to protect you." Mr. Henderson's eyes were like chips of ice. He looked at Marcus's hand, then back at his face. "Protect her. Miss Brooks is a 28-year-old woman. She is a legal adult of sound mind and full capacity, and she runs her own successful business." "Not quite," Marcus said. His smile was gone. His voice was flat, cold, and full of triumph. "We filed a petition with the Fulton County Superior Court this morning." He tapped the folder on the desk. "A petition for an emergency conservatorship." The word hit me like a physical blow. Conservatorship. I couldn't breathe. My heart, which had been pounding, seemed to stop completely. This wasn't real. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies to pop stars. It couldn't be happening to me. "A conservatorship," I finally choked out. Are you insane? I run a business. I pay my taxes. I own a car." Althea stepped forward, her face a mask of pity. "We know, honey. We know you try, but we have proof. It's obvious your aunt was taking advantage of your fragile mental state. She was isolating you. We have the medical records." She looked at Mr. Henderson, her eyes gleaming with malice. "The accident from when she was 8, when she set her own room on fire." My blood ran cold. The old lie, the one they had used to get rid of me. "She has a history of self-harm," Althea finished, her voice a whisper of fake sadness. "That is a lie." The scream ripped out of my chest, raw and full of 20 years of pain. I jumped to my feet, my chair toppling over behind me with a loud crash. "I did not set that fire. It was Jamal. It was my brother. He and his friends were playing with matches. I was trying to put it out. You know that. Marcus said, his voice calm and reasonable, which was the most terrifying part, "is the story you have always clung to. How very sad." He looked past me at Mr. Henderson, who was now standing as well. "Mr. Henderson, as her legal petitioners, we are informing you that until a judge rules on our daughter's competency, this entire estate and all its assets are to be frozen. Effective immediately, you will not release $1. I stared at them, my entire body shaking. They had planned this. This wasn't a sudden, greedy impulse. They had been planning this for weeks, maybe longer. They had doctors. They had lawyers. They were using a lie they had created 20 years ago to paint me as insane, to lock me out of my own life, and to steal everything Aunt Rosetta had ever worked for. I was trapped. The room was spinning. The word conservatorship echoed in my ears. They had planned this. That lie about the fire, that 20-year-old lie, was their key to stealing my future. I looked at Althea. She had a smug, satisfied smirk on her face, her arms crossed as if the matter was settled. Marcus looked like a man who had just won the lottery, arrogant and proud. They thought they had me. They thought I was a broken, grieving girl they could easily roll over. But then I saw Mr. Henderson. He was not panicking. He was not angry. He looked patient. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this exact move. He calmly straightened his tie and looked directly at Marcus. "Actually, Mr. Marcus," he said, his voice cutting through the tense silence like a knife, "the reading is not quite finished." Althea scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "What more is there? It doesn't matter. The assets are frozen." "On the contrary," Mr. Henderson said. He slowly, deliberately turned the last page of the will. "There is one final provision." He looked down and read, his voice clear and powerful, filling the room. Final clause. "In the event that any person related to me by blood or not formally challenges this last will and testament or attempts to gain financial or legal control over my niece Chani Brooks by any means." He paused. He lifted his eyes from the paper. He did not look at me. He looked directly at Althea and Marcus. His gaze was heavy like a judge's gavel about to fall. "I have placed in the care of my attorney, Mr. Henderson, a sealed safe deposit box. This box, to be opened only by Chani upon such a challenge, contains all the necessary documentation, evidence, and final instructions required to protect her future and execute my true wishes." The air in the room went still. Althea's smug smile faltered. What is that supposed to mean?" Mr. Henderson closed the thick leather folder. The sound was a soft, final thud. He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "It means, Mrs. Althea, Mr. Marcus, that by filing your petition for an emergency conservatorship this morning, you have by legal definition challenged this will. You have attempted to gain control of Chani's assets." He let the words hang in the air for a terrible second. "And in doing so, you have just officially activated Rosetta's final line of defense. Congratulations." The blood drained from Althea's perfectly made-up face. Marcus's confident expression collapsed. He looked like he had been punched. They stared, mouths slightly open, their faces pale and suddenly slick with sweat. They had walked right into a trap, and my Aunt Rosetta, even from the grave, had just sprung it. I left Mr. Henderson's office, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The cold, heavy weight of the metal safe deposit box was in my bag. It felt like a ticking bomb. My mind was reeling. Conservatorship, mentally unstable, history of self-harm. They were using a lie, a 20-year-old lie, to try and erase me. All I wanted was to get to Aunt Rosetta's house in Collier Heights. It wasn't just a house. It was the only real home I had ever known. It was my sanctuary. It was the beautiful brick house where Aunt Rosetta taught me how to bake her cornbread, where we would sit on the porch and laugh, where she held me when I had nightmares about the bus station. It was the only place in the world I felt safe. I finally got my new key into the lock. The door swung open. I was expecting the comforting silence of a home that was grieving with me. I was expecting the familiar, faint smell of lemon oil and old, beloved books. Instead, I was hit in the face by the smell of greasy, fast food fried chicken. And laughter. Loud, obnoxious laughter. The sound of a sports game blaring from the living room television. My blood ran cold. I hadn't invited anyone. I hadn't spoken to anyone. I stood frozen in the entryway. I walked slowly down the hall, my bag clutched to my chest. My heart was hammering a frantic bird against my ribs. I turned the corner into the living room, and my world tilted on its axis for the second time that day. My golden child brother Jamal was sprawled out on Aunt Rosetta's favorite cream-colored velvet sofa. He was 30 years old, but he still had the same arrogant slouch he'd had at 16. He had his dirty sneakers propped up on her antique wooden coffee table. Empty boxes of Popeye's chicken and biscuit crumbs were scattered on the floor around him. Next to him, his wife Becky was scrolling through her phone. Becky was Becky. She was 30, white blonde, and carried an air of perpetual annoyance as if the entire world was slightly disappointing to her. They were just eating and laughing, like it was a party, in my aunt's home. The funeral had been this morning. What? What are you doing? My voice came out as a strangled whisper. Jamal looked up, his mouth full of chicken. He chewed loudly, shamelessly, then swallowed. "Oh, hey, little sister," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You're finally home. Took you long enough." "What are you doing here?" I asked again, my voice stronger this time. "What is all this? Get your feet off her table." Jamal just smirked. He took another bite of chicken. "Mom and Dad called," he said, wiping his greasy fingers on the sofa's armrest. I winced. "Said the meeting went, well, they said you were pretty upset. Unstable was the word, I think. They said you might need some support. So we're here. Support." Becky finally looked up from her phone, her nose wrinkled in disgust. She stood up, brushing crumbs from her designer leggings. She began to walk around the room, picking up Aunt Rosetta's belongings, her face a mask of distaste. She tapped a long acrylic nail against a beautiful hand-carved wooden mask from Ghana that Aunt Rosetta had cherished. "Ugh," Becky said, her voice thin and reedy. "This whole place is just so dark." She waved her hand around the room at the rich mahogany wood, the vibrant paintings, the shelves full of Black literature and history. "It's all this ethnic stuff. It's so gloomy. We are definitely going to have to paint everything. A nice clean white. It will brighten the whole place up." I felt the blood drain from my face. Paint it white. She was talking about erasing my aunt. Erasing me. Becky then turned to Jamal and smiled, a thin, satisfied, plodding smile. "The master bedroom upstairs is perfect, honey. It gets the best afternoon light. That will be ours, of course." My bag, the one with the metal box, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I was speechless. They weren't visiting. They were moving in. "Get out," I finally said. My voice was low, and it was shaking with a rage so deep and so cold it scared me. "Get out of my house. Both of you. Now." Jamal just laughed, a short barking sound. "Nah, we can't do that." Becky stepped next to him, patting his arm, the two of them a united front against me. "Your parents were very clear, Chani," she said, her voice dripping with that fake syrupy pity. "You're not well. You can't be left alone. You might do something crazy." She looked me up and down, a smug little smile on her face. "We're here to watch you. You should probably just get used to it. We're here to stay, at least until your parents officially take over." The rage that hit me was so cold and so pure it almost made me dizzy. My hands, still clutching the bag with the metal box, were shaking. Not from fear, from absolute fury. "Get out," I said again, my voice dangerously low. "Both of you, get your filthy feet off her furniture, take your trash and get out of my house, or I am calling the police." Jamal actually laughed. He threw his head back, a loud barking sound that held no humor. It was the same laugh he used when he broke my bike when I was 10 and told me I deserved it. "Call them?" he challenged, dropping his feet to the floor and leaning forward, his greasy smile fading. "Go ahead, Chani. Pick up the phone. What are you going to tell them? Officer, help me. My big mean brother is in my house." He gestured to the chicken boxes. "What's the crime, eating lunch?" "You are trespassing," I yelled, my voice finally cracking. "This is my house. Aunt Rosetta left it to me." "Did she?" Jamal sneered. "Or did she leave it to the unstable girl who isn't fit to manage her own affairs? That's what Mom and Dad are telling the court right now." My blood ran cold. You knew," I whispered. "You knew about the conservatorship. You're part of this." "You're not my brother!" I screamed, the words ripping out of me, tasting like ash. You were never my brother. You're just the bully who stole $200 of my dishwashing money when I was 12 so you could buy those new Jordans. And when I told Mom she slapped me. She slapped me for lying about her golden boy. Jamal's face darkened. He hated being reminded of that. He stood up, using his height to try and intimidate me. He was at least a foot taller than me. You still haven't forgotten that, he spat. My God, you're pathetic, so petty. It was $200 20 years ago. Get over it. Get out of my house. No, he yelled back, his voice booming in the quiet room. You don't get it, do you? You're not in charge anymore. Mom and Dad are, and they asked me to be here. They asked me to look after my unstable little sister. And then his face changed. The anger was replaced by a slow, cruel, understanding smile. He saw the panic in my eyes. He saw the trap. That's the point, Chani, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Don't you see the setup? You're trapped? I just stared at him, my mind racing. Think about it, he said, tapping his temple. You call the cops. We tell them we're just here to support our grieving, unstable sister. Who do you think they're going to believe, us, the normal family, or you, the girl who our parents are literally telling a judge is mentally unfit? You start screaming about trespassing and stolen money from 20 years ago. You'll sound crazy. You'll sound unstable. He leaned in closer. You make a scene, you try to force us out. All you're doing is proving our parents right. You are handing them the proof they need to take everything. So go ahead, Chani. Call the cops. Please, make a scene. Prove us right. The air was sucked out of my lungs. He was right. It was a trap. A perfect, inescapable trap. If I did nothing, they stayed. If I fought back, I proved their case. I was being legally and emotionally checkmated in my own home. I looked at Becky. She was watching the whole thing with a smug, satisfied smirk on her face, like she was watching her favorite reality TV show. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I felt the walls closing in. The house, my sanctuary, was now my prison. Jamal's smile widened. You got it now, don't you? You're trapped, little sister. You have nowhere to go. I looked at his smug face, at her cruel smile, at the greasy fingerprints on my aunt's sofa. I turned around. I didn't run. I walked. I held on to the last shred of my dignity, clutching the bag with the metal box so tightly my knuckles were white. I walked back down the hall, up the stairs, each step feeling like I was wading through wet cement. I reached my old bedroom, the guest room that had become my refuge. I went inside. I slammed the door shut. I turned the lock, a flimsy brass knob that I knew wouldn't stop them if they really wanted to get in. I slid down the back of the door until I was sitting on the floor, my aunt's name, a silent scream in my throat. And from downstairs, I heard Becky's high-pitched, mocking laughter. It was faint, but it was clear. See? She called out, her voice drifting up the stairs. I told you. She's paranoid. She's locking herself in her room. She's definitely unstable. I slid to the floor, my back pressed hard against the cheap hollow wood of the bedroom door. My breath was coming in short, panicked gasps. Downstairs, I could still hear Becky's high-pitched laugh and Jamal's booming voice. They were celebrating. They had successfully backed me into a corner in my own home, and they were enjoying it. I was shaking, a deep, cold tremor that started in my chest and spread out to my fingertips. I was trapped, utterly, completely trapped. They were right. If I called the police, I'd look exactly like the unstable, paranoid person they were painting me to be. My hand was still clutching the strap of my bag, the metal box. I pulled the bag onto my lap. My fingers fumbled with the clasp before I finally ripped it open. The metal box was cold to the touch. It was heavy, solid, real. In a world that had suddenly turned into a nightmare, this box was the only real thing I had. It was the last thing Aunt Rosetta had touched. It was her final move in a chess game I didn't even know she was playing. With trembling hands, I found the small key Mr. Henderson had given me. I put it in the lock. It clicked. I lifted the heavy lid. There was no jewelry, no stacks of cash, just paper. Old fold neat, meticulously organized stacks of paper. On the very top, there was a single envelope. My name was written on the front, in my aunt's familiar, elegant handwriting. I pulled it out. The paper felt thick, expensive. I opened the flap and unfolded the letter. "My dearest Chani," it began. In my head, I heard her voice clear as day, warm, strong, and full of love. "My dearest Chani," her voice echoed in my mind. "If you are reading this letter, it means the worst has happened. It means I am gone. And it means Althea has finally shown her face." I squeezed my eyes shut, a fresh wave of grief hitting me so hard it knocked the breath out of me. "My sister," her voice continued. "Your mother. She was always a broken thing. She was a pit of jealousy that could never be filled. She envied my success. She envied my freedom. But most of all, she envied the fact that I had you. She could never forgive me for saving you from them." My brow furrowed. Saving me. "There is something you must know, Chani. A truth I have kept from you to protect you. I wanted to wait until you were older, stronger. I suppose that time is now. You are 28. You are strong enough." I read the next line, and the world stopped. "You have to know the truth, baby. The lie they built everything on. You were 8 years old, that fire. That, it was Jamal. I always knew it was. But that's not the secret." Her voice in my head was steady, full of a sad resolve. "The secret is what happened at the bus station. Althea did not abandon you, Chani. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of panic. It was a business transaction." My heart stopped. "She called me 3 days before. She said you were damaged goods. She said you were out of control. She said she couldn't handle you anymore. She said she and Marcus wanted a fresh start without you. She knew how much I loved you. She knew I would do anything for you. So she made me an offer." I couldn't breathe. "She didn't abandon you, Chani. She sold you to me." A memory sharp and bright and brutal flashed in my mind. A memory I had pushed down for 20 years. Me, 8 years old, being yanked by the arm out of the car. Althea's nails digging into my skin. "Sit here," she hissed, shoving me onto the hard plastic bench of the Greyhound station. "And don't you move. Someone is coming to get you." "Mommy," I had whimpered, clutching my backpack. "I'm scared. Where are you going? Don't leave me." She had knelt down, her face close to mine. Her eyes were cold like black stones, and she said the words I would never forget. "I am not your mommy anymore." Back in my room, I was sobbing. A raw, ragged, silent scream tore from my chest. I wasn't abandoned. I was sold. My eyes blurred with tears, but I forced myself to read the last line on the page. "She demanded $50,000 in cash," my aunt's voice said in my head, full of an old cold anger. "I met her at a diner. I paid her. I would have paid $1 million. I would have paid anything to get you away from her." I dropped the letter, my whole body shaking. $50,000. That was my price. I sat there on the floor, the letter crumpled in my fist. The word "sold" echoed in the silent room. $50,000. That was my price. The grief I felt, the deep, agonizing loss of my aunt, was suddenly overshadowed by a new emotion, a cold, sharp, and clarifying anger. It burned away my tears. It steadied my shaking hands. My aunt had not just left me money. She had left me an arsenal. I wiped my face, my breath no longer a sob, but a slow, steady inhale. I looked back into the metal box. My movements were no longer frantic, they were deliberate. Underneath where the letter had been, there was another document. It was folded, the paper thick and yellowed with age. It looked official. I unfolded it. My eyes scanned the top. It was a legal document. The title was typed in all caps, "Contract of Parental Rights Relinquishment." My heart hammered against my ribs. I read the text. It was dry legal language. but it said in no uncertain terms that for the sum of $50,000, Althea and Marcus fully and irrevocably terminated all parental rights to me. And then I saw the bottom of the page, the signatures. Althea's a flamboyant, narcissistic swirl. Marcus is a heavy, dark slash. And beside them, a notary stamp embossed and official. And the date. The date was exactly 20 years ago. The day I was left at the bus station. This was it. This was weapon number 1. This was the proof. I thought I finally understood. But I was wrong. I picked up the letter again, and I saw there was writing on the back. But 50,000 was never going to be enough for them, Chani. My aunt's voice echoed in my head, the warmth gone replaced by a cold, weary anger. It was only the beginning. My blood ran cold. A few years later, Jamal wanted to go to a private out-of-state college, an expensive one. Althea called me. She said the contract was just a piece of paper. She said if I didn't pay his tuition, she would go to court. She would claim I had coerced her into signing it. She threatened to drag you into a custody battle to tell a judge I was an unfit guardian. It was a lie, of course. But you were happy. You were thriving. I couldn't risk it. I couldn't let them put you through that. The letter continued. It was blackmail pure and simple. So I paid. I paid to keep them quiet. I paid to keep you safe. And once they knew I would pay, they never stopped coming back. My anger turned into a cold, hard stone in my stomach. I looked back in the box. Underneath where the contract had been, there was a small, black, unassuming ledger book. It looked like something you would use to balance a checkbook. I opened it. My eyes went wide. It was my aunt's perfect, meticulous handwriting. The entire book was filled. Every single page was an entry. There were columns. Date, amount, reason. My hands were steady as I read the first entry. May 10, 2011. Amount $15,000. Reason Jamal's college tuition. I turned the page. August 3, 2013. Amount $5,000. Reason Marcus's gambling debts. I turned the page again. January 1st, 2015. Amount $10,000. Reason Christmas bonus. Althea's hush money. Page after page. June 22nd, 2018. Amount $20,000. Reason Althea's credit card debt. It went on for years. Every time they needed money, they came back. And my aunt had recorded every single transaction, every single piece of blackmail. I flipped to the very last page. She had kept a running total at the bottom. $537,000. They hadn't just sold me once. They had been selling me piece by piece for my entire life. $537,000. My aunt had been paying them my entire life to keep me safe. My grief for her was now mixed with a white-hot, purifying rage. They hadn't just sold me. They had been parasites bleeding my aunt dry for 2 decades. I thought that was it. I thought the black ledger was the final weapon. I reached into the box expecting to feel the cold metal bottom. Instead, my fingers brushed against something small and hard wrapped in a piece of velvet cloth. I pulled it out. It was a USB flash drive. A modern piece of technology hidden among 20-year-old papers. I was confused. I picked up the letter again, my hands no longer shaking. There was a final postscript at the very bottom. P.S. My aunt's voice read in my head, and this time it sounded different. It wasn't sad or angry. It was the voice of a chess master about to declare checkmate. Althea thinks I am weak. She thinks this illness has made me senile and soft. She called me Chani. She called me 3 weeks ago on a video chat to tell me her plans. She told me how she was going to prove I was incompetent, how she was going to have me declared unfit, and how she was going to take everything from me, including you. My blood went cold. She thought I was a dying old woman. She didn't know I was recording the entire call. Use this wisely, my daughter. She gave you the rope. Let her use it. I love you, Rosetta. I stared at the small piece of plastic and metal in my hand. A recording. A recording of Althea detailing her entire plan. Bang, bang, bang. A violent rattling pound on the bedroom door made me jump, pulling me from the past and slamming me back into the present. Chani? It was Becky's shrill, mocking voice muffled through the wood. Are you going to hide in there all day? You should come out. Your parents are on their way over. They just called Jamal. Another bang, harder this time. They have good news from the court. Chani Jamal said they got a temporary order. It's all happening. You're gonna be taken care of. Her high-pitched laugh followed, floating under the door. Good news. They were coming. They had a court order. They thought they had won. I looked at the black ledger in my lap. I looked at the 20-year-old contract. And I looked at the USB drive in my hand. I grabbed my laptop from my bag, my movements fast and deliberate. I sat on the edge of the bed and booted it up. I jammed the USB into the port. A single video file appeared on the screen. I stared at it. I could hear Jamal and Becky downstairs, their voices loud and celebratory, already planning how to spend my aunt's money. Good news, I whispered to the closed door, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. Let's see who really has the good news. I took a deep breath. The cold, clarifying rage had burned away the panic. I could feel the weight of the black ledger in my pocket. The sharp edges of the folded contract felt like a shield against my chest. The USB drive was a small, hard secret in my hand. I unlocked the bedroom door. The click of the lock was loud in the small room. Downstairs, the laughter and loud voices continued. They were in the kitchen, my aunt's kitchen, the heart of the home. I could hear Jamal's booming laugh, Becky's high-pitched giggle, and the deeper, confident tones of my parents. They sounded like they were celebrating. I walked down the stairs, each step firm, deliberate. My home no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a battlefield. And I was finally armed. I turned the corner into the kitchen. The scene was a violation. All four of them were there. Jamal was leaning against the counter drinking a beer. Becky was sitting on the kitchen island scrolling through her phone, her dirty shoes resting on the wooden stool where my aunt used to sit. Marcus was looking over some mail, my aunt's private mail, with a frown on his face. And Althea. Althea had the refrigerator door wide open. Her face was twisted in a grimace of pure disgust. Ugh, look at this, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. She held up a bunch of kale. Kale, quinoa, wheatgrass juice. It's no wonder she was sick all the time. Rosetta was always so strange, bizarre. She was healthy, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through their chatter like a razor. All four of them froze. They turned to look at me, surprised. I was no longer the crying, hysterical girl who had run upstairs. I was just standing there. Marcus was the first to recover. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. He dropped the mail on the counter. Ah, Chani. There you are, darling, he boomed, walking toward me. We were just celebrating. We have wonderful, wonderful news. He tried to put his arm around my shoulder, but I took a hard step back. He frowned for a second, then his smile returned even wider. We just came from our lawyer's office, he announced, clasping his hands in front of him like a proud father. The judge reviewed our emergency petition. He agrees that you are in a vulnerable state. He's fast-tracking the hearing. Will be in court next week. And? Althea chimed in, slamming the refrigerator door shut, her eyes gleaming with triumph. He granted us temporary emergency supervision. I just stared at them. I let the silence hang. What does that mean? Althea laughed, a short, condescending sound. Oh, honey. What that means in small words that you can understand is that until the judge sees you, not one single financial decision can be made without our approval. You can't write a check. You can't use a credit card. You can't even pay the light bill. She swept her arm around the beautiful kitchen. Everything is frozen, under our control, for your own protection, of course. Jamal, still leaning against the counter, raised his beer bottle in a toast. See, good news, he sneered. I told you. You should be nice to us, little sister. He patted his own pocket. Maybe if you cooperate, be a good girl, Mom and Dad will give you a nice little allowance from your own money. He and Becky laughed. The four of them stood there, a united wall of greed, their faces smug and triumphant. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. They were just waiting for me to cry, to scream, to fall apart to prove them right. I was quiet. I let them enjoy their moment. Then I slowly walked past them. I walked to the solid butcher block kitchen island in the center of the room. It was the heart of the house. It was where Aunt Rosetta and I had rolled out dough for cookies, where we'd snapped green beans, where we'd talked for hours. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the small black, unassuming ledger book. I placed it on the wooden surface. The sound of the book hitting the wood was not loud. It was a soft, solid, heavy thud, but in that room it sounded like a gunshot. All four of them stopped laughing. Instantly, their smiles froze. All their eyes snapped down to that little black book. They had no idea what it was, but they knew in that single second that the game had just changed. The four of them stared at the small black book on the island. The silence in the kitchen was suddenly deafening. The smirks were gone, replaced by a confused, wary tension. Jamal, for the first time, looked uncertain. He put his beer bottle down. "What is that?" Althea finally asked, her voice sharp and suspicious. "More of your aunt's weird journals." Jamal let out a nervous laugh, trying to recover his bravado. "What did she leave you, her diary?" "That's pathetic, Shawnee. Look, just accept the allowance. Be a good girl." I looked up from the book. I didn't look at Althea or Marcus. I looked directly at my brother Jamal. "An allowance." I repeated, my voice quiet, but it carried across the room. "You mean like the allowance Aunt Rosetta has been giving you and Mom and Dad for the last 20 years? Althea's face tightened. What are you talking about?" "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not," I said. I placed my hand flat on the cover of the black book. "Aunt Rosetta was meticulous." I used Mr. Henderson's word. It felt good. She kept records of everything. I opened the ledger. The old paper crackled slightly. I turned to the first page. "Let's see," I said, my voice conversational, as if I were reading a grocery list. "Here's the first big one. May 10, 2011. Amount $15,000. I looked up at Jamal. Reason: Jamal's private college tuition. Jamal froze. His face went pale. Becky, who had been watching from the island stool, let out a little laugh. "What 15,000, Jamal? You told me your parents paid for your college." "Shut up, Becky." Jamal muttered, his eyes glued to the book. "Oh, but they did pay," I said, turning the page. "Or at least they took the money for it. But let's keep going. This is a family affair after all." I looked at Marcus. "Dad, you're in here too. August 3rd, 2013, amount $5,000. Reason." I paused for effect. "Reason: to cover Marcus's gambling debts." Becky gasped. This time it wasn't a laugh. She slid off the stool, her face a mask of confusion and anger. "Gambling debts. Jamal, what is she talking about? Your father doesn't gamble." I said, "Shut up, Becky!" Jamal yelled, his voice cracking. "She's lying, it's all lies." "Is it?" I asked calmly. "The bank transfer records are all in my lawyer's office, but this is a very detailed summary." I turned another page, looking at Althea. Her face was ashen. "Ah, here you are, Mom. June 22nd, 2018, amount $20,000. Wow. Reason: to pay off Althea's store credit card debt." $20,000? Becky whispered, her eyes wide. She looked at Althea's designer suit, at her expensive bag. She was finally connecting the dots. "Jamal, you told me your mother was good with money. You told me that was an inheritance. It's not just that, I said, flipping through page after page, letting them see the endless columns of numbers. It's all here. January 1st, 2015, $10,000. Reason Christmas bonus Althea's hush money. March 30th, 2019, $7,000. Reason Jamal's car repairs. Becky's voice was shaking. Jamal, we paid for those car repairs. I paid for them. I used my bonus. Where did that $7,000 go? Jamal just stared at her, his mouth opening and closing, no sound coming out. I closed the book with a soft final thud. It totals, I said, my voice echoing in the dead silence of the kitchen. $537,000. An allowance. My aunt has been paying you my whole life. Blackmail, really? To keep you away from me. To keep you quiet. Becky turned on Jamal, her face white with rage. You lied to me. All this time you've been taking money from this poor old woman? You told me she was the crazy one. You told me your family was successful. Shut up, Becky! Jamal roared, his panic finally exploding into rage. Marcus had been silent, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. But now he moved. He lunged across the kitchen island, his hand outstretched, his eyes wild. Give me that book, he yelled, his voice a desperate growl. You little brat. You made that up, you're lying. He clawed for the book, his fingers just inches from it. I snatched the book back, pulling it to my chest just as his fingers grazed the cover. Don't you touch me! I yelled, my voice sharp and strong. He looked startled by my sudden fierceness. I took a step back, my eyes locking onto his. It doesn't even matter. It's all backed up. It's all digitized. My lawyer has the originals of every bank transfer. This, I said, holding up the small black book, this is just a copy, my copy. Marcus's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. Becky was staring at Jamal, her eyes wide with betrayal. Gambling debts. You lied to me. You've been lying to our whole family. Shut up, Becky, Jamal yelled, his voice cracking with panic. He looked at Althea and Marcus, desperate. Mom! Dad, do something! She's crazy! She's making this all up! Althea, who had been frozen in place, her face pale, finally snapped. Her eyes, which had been wide with shock, narrowed into slits of pure hatred. Crazy! She shrieked, her voice rising. Of course she is! She's just like my sister, lying, manipulative. She took a step toward me, her finger pointing at my face. And so what? So what if Rosetta gave us money? She owed us for what she did. The kitchen went silent. I just stared at her. I didn't say a word. I let her talk. I let her dig her own grave. She felt guilty. Althea continued, scrambling for a justification. She knew she was wrong. She knew she had no right. She stole my daughter from me. There it was. The word. The one word my aunt had been waiting 20 years for her to say. Stole, I whispered. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Stole, I repeated louder this time. I let the black ledger fall from my hand onto the kitchen island. It didn't matter anymore. It was just the opening act. Is that what you call it, Althea, stealing? I reached into the front pocket of my jeans. My hand closed around the thick, folded document. The contract. Weapon number 2. I pulled it out. Marcus saw it. His eyes widened in horrified recognition. He knew what it was. He tried to speak. Althea, wait. But it was too late. I unfolded the yellowed 20-year-old paper. I held it up for all of them to see, the notary stamp and the bold typed title facing them. Or do you call it, I said, my voice cold and clear, a contract of parental rights relinquishment? Althea stopped breathing. Her eyes locked on the paper. She couldn't speak. $50,000, I said, my voice echoing in the dead silence. That was the price. My price. $50,000 in cash in exchange for you terminating all legal rights to me forever. That wasn't stealing, Mom. That was a sale. Marcus stumbled backward like he had been physically shoved. He leaned against the counter, his face a sickly gray. He remembered signing it. Althea just stared, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. She was trapped. Becky's jaw was on the floor. I held the silence for a long, terrible moment. I watched her mind race, watched her try to find a new lie, a new escape. Finally, she found her voice. It was not a yell. It was a low, desperate, venomous hiss. "You think you're smart, don't you?" she spat at me. "You think that piece of paper means anything? It's worthless. It's just a piece of paper." She took a step closer, her confidence returning, a desperate false bravado. "We are your parents. That is biology. That is a fact. And the court will always believe us over you. They won't see a contract. They will see an unstable, paranoid, grieving girl lashing out, telling wild, crazy stories to smear the very parents who are just trying to help her. You have no idea what you're doing." "That's a very interesting legal theory," I said. My voice was calm. It was so calm it even scared me a little. "That a judge will just ignore a notarized contract," Althea sneered. "He will when we show him the medical reports. The proof that you are and always have been unstable." I nodded slowly. "Ah, yes. The proof. You mean the forged medical report you filed with your petition this morning? The one about the fire when I was 8? The one that claims I have a history of self-harm?" Marcus, who had been silent and gray-faced, finally spoke. He saw his opening. He saw his lie, and he clung to it like a life raft. "It is not forged," he boomed, his voice finding its authority again. "It is the truth. You were a disturbed child. You set that fire." "That is the truth you're sticking with?" I asked. "That I'm disturbed, that I'm unstable, that I'm crazy?" "You are!" Althea shrieked, her voice cracking. "And the judge will see it. Will he?" I said. I turned, picked up my laptop from the floor by the stairs where I'd left it, and placed it on the kitchen island right next to the black ledger. "Then you should probably see this." I opened the laptop. The screen flickered to life. The single video file was still waiting. The four of them just stared at the computer, a new confused dread dawning on their faces. "What is that?" Becky whispered, her voice shaking. "More of your crazy proof." "Something like that," I said. I hit the play button. The screen lit up. It was a video call. My heart clenched. It was Aunt Rosetta. She was in her hospital bed, looking frail, her skin pale, but her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and angry. And on the other side of the screen was Althea. She was in her car, clearly not knowing she was being recorded, her face a mask of smug, greedy impatience. "You're taking too long to die, Rosetta." Althea's voice, tinny and sharp, filled the kitchen. "You're dragging this out." "What do you want, Althea?" Aunt Rosetta's voice was weak but firm. "I want what I'm owed," Althea snapped. "You stole my life, you stole my daughter, and now you're going to just give everything to her, that ungrateful little brat." "It is her inheritance," Aunt Rosetta said. "It was never yours." Althea laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Oh, it will be. Don't you worry. I have a plan. Marcus and I have had a plan for months. The second you are gone, we are filing for a conservatorship." In the kitchen, Marcus let out a strangled, gasping sound. Jamal looked like he was going to be sick. "You can't," Aunt Rosetta said. "She's an adult." "She's an adult who set her own room on fire," Althea cackled. "That's the story. That's the medical history. It's so easy. A tragic fire, a disturbed child. By the time I'm done, the judge will think she's a paranoid schizophrenic. I'll tell the court she's crazy. I'll tell them she's unstable. I'll tell them she can't be trusted with $5 million. Althea leaned in closer to our camera, her eyes gleaming with pure, unfiltered malice. "And you know what, Rosetta, the court will believe me. They always believe a grieving, concerned mother. When you're dead, I will take everything. I will take the house. I will take the money. And I will finally get what is mine." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. It was a dead, suffocating silence, broken only by the sound of Becky letting out a small, horrified whimper. Jamal was staring at his mother, his face a mask of dawning horror. He wasn't just a bully, he was the son of a monster. Marcus was clutching the counter, his knuckles white. He was breathing in short, shallow gasps. And Althea was staring at the blank laptop screen. Her face was white, chalk white. She wasn't just afraid, she was destroyed. She had just watched her own soul, her own evil played back to her. She had just confessed her entire criminal conspiracy. I let the silence stretch out, letting them drown in it. Then slowly, deliberately, I closed the laptop. The soft click echoed in the kitchen like a gavel. I looked at Althea. Her eyes were wide, terrified. "You're right, Althea," I said, my voice quiet, conversational. "A court might always believe a grieving mother." I picked up the black ledger. I tapped it against the folded contract. "But do you know who they believe even more than a grieving mother? Do you know who they believe more than a notarized contract? More than a video confession? More than anyone?" I paused, letting her dread build. The IRS. The following week, I walked into the Fulton County Courthouse. The air was cold and sterile. It smelled like old paper and floor wax. The ceilings were too high, and every small sound, a cough, a footstep on the marble, echoed. This was not my world. This was a world of hard, wooden benches, fluorescent lights, and grim-faced people. Mr. Henderson walked beside me, his face calm and unreadable. We sat at the defense table. Across the room at the petitioner's table sat Althea and Marcus. They were dressed for the part. Althea wore a modest, high-necked navy blue dress. Her makeup was subtle, her expression one of deep maternal concern. Marcus wore a simple suit, his hands clasped in front of him, his face a mask of a worried, responsible father. They looked perfect. They looked like victims. Their lawyer was a slick man in an expensive suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. He was shuffling papers, looking completely arrogantly confident. Jamal and Becky were not there. They were, as Mr. Henderson had discovered already, looking for their own lawyers. The bailiff called out and the judge entered. She was an older African-American woman, Judge Angela Wyatt. Her face was stern-lined with wisdom, and her eyes, looking out over her reading glasses, missed nothing. She looked like she had heard every lie ever told. "We are here," Judge Wyatt said, her voice booming, "on the matter of the emergency petition for conservatorship for Miss Chani Brooks." She looked at Althea's lawyer. "Counselor, you may begin." The slick lawyer stood up. He walked to the center of the room. He did not look at us. He looked at the judge, his face a perfect performance of pained sympathy. "Thank you, Your Honor." He began, his voice smooth and sad. "Your Honor, what we have here today is a tragedy, a profound family tragedy." He gestured to Althea and Marcus, who both looked down as if overcome with emotion. "My clients, Althea and Marcus, are loving, heartbroken parents. For 20 years they have been cruelly and systematically alienated from their only daughter, the young woman sitting right there." He pointed at me. "They were alienated," he continued, his voice rising with false righteousness, "by the petitioner's late aunt, Rosetta James, a woman who by all accounts was possessive, manipulative, and deeply hateful of my clients. And now," the lawyer said, walking closer to the judge's bench, "Miss Rosetta James has passed, and she has left her entire multi-million-dollar estate to Miss Brooks, a young woman who, as we have documented in our petition, has a long and tragic history of severe mental instability." The courtroom was silent. I could feel Althea's eyes on me. "We have filed," the lawyer said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "the medical reports, the reports from her childhood, reports that detail a deeply traumatic incident of self-harm at age 8 when Miss Brooks set her own bedroom on fire." I held my breath. The lie sounded so official, so clinical in this cold, formal room. "She is by all definitions a vulnerable person," the lawyer pressed on. "And now grieving and overwhelmed, her paranoia has become extreme. She is lashing out. She is accusing her own parents, these two people who love her, of wild, fantastical, and deeply hurtful things. She believes they are trying to steal from her. She believes they are part of a conspiracy. He turned and looked at me, his eyes full of fake pity. Your Honor, my clients are not greedy, they are terrified. They are here today to do the hardest, most painful thing any parent can ever do. They are here to save their child from herself. They are asking for this conservatorship not to control her money, but to protect her, to get her the help she so desperately and obviously needs. The lawyer nodded, his performance complete, and sat down. The silence that followed was heavy. Althea dabbed at a dry eye with a tissue. Marcus shook his head slowly, as if in deep sorrow. They were good. They were very, very good. Judge Wyatt looked at their lawyer for a long, hard moment. Then she looked at Althea and Marcus. Finally, her gaze moved. It swept across the room and landed directly on me. Her eyes were sharp, analytical, and impossible to read. Miss Brooks, the judge said, her deep voice cutting through the silence, these are very serious allegations. Your parents have submitted medical documentation that appears to support their claims of your instability. What exactly do you have to say in response to this petition? I stood up slowly. My legs felt steady. The cold, clarifying anger from the kitchen was still there, but now it was forged into something hard and sharp like steel. I looked at Althea's lawyer. I looked at Althea and Marcus. And then I looked directly at Judge Wyatt. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear and strong, echoing slightly in the quiet room. I am not unstable. I am not paranoid. I paused, letting the words sink in. I am just very, very well informed. Judge Wyatt raised an eyebrow. What does that mean, Miss Brooks? It means, I said that my aunt prepared me for this day. Mr. Henderson stood up beside me. Your Honor, in response to the petitioner's claims, we would like to present Exhibit B. He placed the small black ledger book on the overhead projector. The courtroom's large screen flickered to life, showing the first page of my aunt's meticulous handwriting. This, Mr. Henderson said, his voice booming with authority, is a ledger kept by Miss Rosetta James for 20 years. It details every single payment made by her to the petitioners Mr. and Mrs. Marcus. He clicked to the next slide, showing a summary page. The payments include $15,000 for their son's tuition, $5,000 for Mr. Marcus's gambling debts, $20,000 for Mrs. Althea's credit card debt. The list, as you can see, is extensive. Althea's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is slander. These are just notes. They don't prove anything. The total, Mr. Henderson continued, his voice drowning him out, is $537,000. We are not calling this family support, Your Honor. We are calling this, as Miss James herself noted, extortion. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Judge Wyatt banged her gavel. Order! Althea, her face purple with rage, shot up from her chair. That is a lie! She shrieked, her mask of maternal concern completely gone. She's lying. Rosetta gave us that money. It was a gift. She owed us. She owed us for taking my daughter. She had done it. She had just admitted in open court to taking the money. Judge Wyatt stared at her, her face like stone. Mrs. Althea, sit down. Mr. Henderson waited for her to sit. Thank you, Mrs. Althea. You've confirmed the payments. But as for why Miss James felt she owed you, we would like to present Exhibit C. He placed the folded yellow document on the projector. The title, Contract of Parental Rights Relinquishment, filled the screen. This is a legally notarized contract, Your Honor, Mr. Henderson said. Dated 20 years ago. In it, Mr. and Mrs. Marcus, in exchange for $50,000, legally terminate all parental rights to Chani Brooks. The subsequent payments, as detailed in the ledger, were blackmail. Payments to prevent them from violating this contract and interfering in Miss Brooks's life. Marcus shot to his feet, his face pale and sweaty. It's a fake. That's a forgery. We never signed that. We would never abandon our daughter. We love our daughter. Mr. Henderson just smiled. It was a small, sad, tired smile. I anticipated you might say that, Mr. Marcus, which is why we have Exhibit D. Mr. Henderson nodded at the bailiff. The main courtroom lights dimmed slightly and the large video screens on either side of the judge flickered to life. This, Your Honor, Mr. Henderson said, is Exhibit D, a video call recorded 3 weeks ago. The screen was split. On one side I saw my Aunt Rosetta. My heart seized. She was in her hospital bed, propped up on pillows. She looked so frail, so tired, but her eyes, even on the grainy video, were sharp and defiant. On the other side of the screen was Althea. She was in her car, the lighting bad, her face arrogant and impatient. She had no idea she was being recorded. "You're taking too long to die, Rosetta." Althea's voice, tinny and cruel, echoed through the silent courtroom. "You're just dragging this out." I heard a sharp collective gasp from the gallery behind me. Althea's lawyer, the slick, confident one, froze. His pen stopped moving. Aunt Rosetta's voice was weak but firm. "What do you want, Althea?" "I want what I am owed," Althea snapped. "You stole my life. You stole my daughter, and now you're just going to give everything to her. That ungrateful, pathetic little brat." "It is her inheritance," my aunt said. "It was never yours." Althea laughed. It was the same cold, ugly laugh from the lawyer's office. "Oh, it will be. Don't you worry about that. Marcus and I have had a plan for months. The second you are gone, we are filing for a conservatorship." At the petitioner's table, Marcus made a small, strangled sound. He looked at his lawyer, his eyes wide with pure panic. "She's an adult, Althea," my aunt said. "She's not that 8-year-old girl you threw away." "She might as well be," Althea cackled. "That's the best part. She's the girl who set her own room on fire." That's the story. That's the medical history. It's so easy. A tragic fire. A disturbed child. By the time I am done, the judge will think she's a paranoid schizophrenic. I will tell the court she is crazy. I will tell them she is unstable. I will tell them she cannot be trusted with $5 million. Althea leaned in closer to her phone's camera, her eyes gleaming with pure, unfiltered malice. "And you know what, Rosetta? The court will believe me. They always believe a grieving, concerned mother. When you are finally dead, I will take everything. I will take the house. I will take the money, and I will finally get what is mine." The video ended. The screens went black. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating, dead silence. I could hear Althea's lawyer letting out his breath in a long, slow, defeated hiss. In the back row where I hadn't even noticed them, I saw Jamal and Becky. They had been ordered to appear. Becky's face was ashen. She looked at Jamal, her eyes wide with horror, and grabbed his arm. Jamal, looking terrified, nodded. Quietly, like rats leaving a sinking ship, they both stood up and slipped out the side door of the courtroom while everyone was still staring at the blank screens. I turned my head. I looked at Althea and Marcus. They were frozen. They were not just pale. They were gray. They were staring at Judge Wyatt, their faces masks of pure, unadulterated horror. They were two criminals who had just listened to their own full confession. Judge Wyatt slowly took off her reading glasses. She polished them, her movements slow, deliberate. She put them back on. She looked at Althea. She looked at Marcus. Her face was like stone. "Mrs. Althea," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Mr. Marcus." Judge Wyatt looked down from her bench. Her face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. The entire courtroom was so quiet I could hear the sound of Althea's ragged, panicked breathing. Her slick lawyer was staring at his notes, his face pale as if he could not believe what he had just heard. He was completely silent. He had no defense. "Mrs. Althea, Mr. Marcus," Judge Wyatt said again, her voice low and dangerous, cutting through the silence. "This court has heard your petition. You came in here today under the guise of being concerned parents. You filed sworn statements, including a forged medical document claiming your daughter, Miss Brooks, is mentally unstable and a danger to herself. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. What this court has just witnessed is not a hearing for a conservatorship. What this court has just witnessed is the unraveling of a conspiracy. This is evidence of profound calculated fraud. This is evidence of perjury. This is evidence of a criminal attempt to defraud Miss Brooks of her rightful inheritance. Althea's lawyer, finally finding his voice, shot to his feet. Your Honor, I must object. My clients they were emotional. That video, it's taken out of context. Clearly, Mrs. Althea was just venting grieving. Sit down, counselor, Judge Wyatt commanded, her voice like thunder. Sit down before I hold you in contempt. Are you seriously trying to tell me that a detailed multi-month plan to file a fraudulent medical report and lie to a court of law is venting? The lawyer sank back into his chair, his face slick with sweat. He was done. At our table, Mr. Henderson slowly, calmly stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He looked at Althea and Marcus not with anger, but with a kind of profound, weary sadness. Your Honor, he said, his voice respectful but firm. Just one final matter for the court to consider. Judge Wyatt nodded at him. Proceed, Mr. Henderson. We have established, Mr. Henderson said, that my late client, Miss Rosetta James, was a meticulous and law-abiding citizen. Her taxes were filed perfectly every year of her life. She accounted for every dollar. We have also established by their own admission that Mr. and Mrs. Marcus have received over the last 20 years a sum totaling $537,000 from Miss James. He paused, letting that number hang in the air. My client, Miss James, categorized these payments as extortion and blackmail. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus have claimed today in open court that these payments were gifts. Either way, that is a very substantial amount of income. He turned very slowly to look directly at Althea and Marcus. Their faces were frozen in a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror. So, my final question is this, Mr. Henderson said, his voice quiet, almost conversational. My client always paid her taxes. I just wonder, did Mr. and Mrs. Marcus, did they declare this $500,000 income to the Internal Revenue Service? Or is this court also looking at 20 years of felony tax evasion? The payoff. It was not a scream. It was a strangled, dying gasp. It came from Marcus. His hands flew to his chest. He clutched his expensive silk tie, his eyes rolling back in his head. He made a horrible gagging sound, and then he just collapsed. He slid sideways out of his chair and hit the courtroom floor with a heavy, sickening thud. Marcus! Althea shrieked, her voice a raw animal sound. She was no longer a sophisticated, grieving mother. She was a cornered rat. She stared at her husband on the floor, then at the judge, her mouth wide open, a silent scream of pure, abject terror. Her lawyer didn't even move. He just stared at the floor, his career flashing before his eyes. The bailiff rushed toward Marcus. Medical emergency! Judge Wyatt was already on her feet. She banged her gavel, the sound like a cannon shot, over and over. Order! Order in the court! The room was chaos. But above it all, her voice rang out clear and final. The petition for conservatorship is denied with extreme prejudice. This court finds that this was a bad faith filing based on fraud and perjury. I am referring this entire case file, including all exhibits, the video, the contract, and the ledger, to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office for immediate criminal investigation into conspiracy to commit fraud, perjury, and extortion. And I am sending a certified copy of this entire transcript, along with Exhibits B and C, directly to the Criminal Investigations Division of the Internal Revenue Service. This court is adjourned. I pushed through the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. The air in the hallway was cold and still a sharp contrast to the chaos I had left behind. Inside that room, my world had been on fire. I could still hear the echoes, Judge Wyatt's gavel cracking like thunder, the sound of Marcus hitting the floor, Althea's raw animal shriek, and the bailiff yelling for a medical unit. It was the sound of a dynasty of lies finally violently collapsing in on itself. Mr. Henderson walked out beside me. He calmly adjusted his suit jacket, his face grim but satisfied. He looked at me, his eyes no longer just sad, but full of a deep, profound respect. "Well," he said, his voice quiet in the marble hallway. "That is that." I leaned against the wall, my legs suddenly weak. The adrenaline that had been holding me up for a week, for my entire life, was gone. It left behind a vast, hollow emptiness. I was free, but I felt like I had just run a marathon. What happens now?" I asked. My voice sounded small. "Now," he said, "you live your life, Chani." He put his briefcase down and looked at me. "They will not be bothering you again. Ever. The court order. The petition is denied," he said. "The freeze on your assets is gone. You are in the eyes of the law exactly what you have always been, a competent, intelligent adult, and the sole rightful heir to your aunt's estate." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. "And them, Althea Marcus?" Mr. Henderson's face hardened. "That, I imagine, is just beginning. What Judge Wyatt did in there. That was not just a ruling, it was a referral. She sent the entire case, all of our evidence, directly to the district attorney for criminal investigation." "Criminal," I whispered. "Perjury." He listed, ticking them off on his fingers. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, filing a false medical report. And that is just the beginning. But honestly, the DA is the least of their worries." He picked up his briefcase. "The IRS," he said, his voice dropping. "The Internal Revenue Service. They do not play Chani. The DA might have to prove intent to defraud. The IRS only has to prove they received $500,000 and did not pay taxes on it. And they admitted to receiving the money right there in open court. It is a simple open and shut case of felony tax evasion." The scale of it was staggering. "So what happens to them?" "They will be audited back 20 years, he said as we began to walk toward the courthouse steps. "Every dime they ever had will be scrutinized. They will be bankrupted. Their assets will be seized, their accounts frozen. And given the amount and the criminal nature of the income, I would be very surprised if they both avoid prison time." I stopped at the top of the wide granite steps. The Atlanta skyline was in front of us, the afternoon sun bright and clear. The world looked different. "Prison," I said, testing the word. "You reap what you sow," Mr. Henderson said simply. A single tear, not of sadness, but of a profound, heavy, impossible release, finally rolled down my cheek. "She knew," I whispered, looking out at the city. "Aunt Rosetta. She knew they would come for me. She planned for all of this. The ledger, the contract, the video. She built all of it to protect me, even after she was gone." "Your aunt was the smartest woman I ever knew," Mr. Henderson said, standing beside me. "She did not just leave you her money, Chani. She left you a fortress. She left you the weapons. All you had to do was be brave enough to use them." I wiped the tear away. I felt a new strength, a quiet, solid core of it settling inside me. She was. As we stood there, a flash of movement at the curb across the street caught my eye. A black Uber was pulling away, speeding off into traffic. I saw them just for a second. In the back seat, Jamal and Becky. They must have slipped out the side door as soon as the video started. They had not waited. They had not stayed to see what happened to their parents, to the people they were conspiring with. They had just run. They had abandoned them, just as they had all abandoned me. They even abandoned each other in the end. I just watched the car disappear. I did not feel anger. I did not feel sadness. I felt nothing. They were gone. They were just irrelevant. 1 month later, the sound of my digital pen scratching against my tablet was the only noise in the room, accompanied by the low hum of my computer. Sunlight, bright and warm, streamed in through the massive, clean windows. I had taken down all the old heavy velvet drapes. The house was transformed. It was my house now, my sanctuary. The living room, once a dark museum of old furniture, was now my studio. My state-of-the-art workstations were set up against one wall. The walls were painted a bright, warm white, just as Becky had wanted. But instead of being sterile, they were alive. I had taken all of Aunt Rosetta's beautiful African art, the masks and sculptures Becky had called gloomy and ethnic, and I had hung them proudly, integrating them with my own modern, vibrant digital designs. It was a fusion of her past and my future. It was perfect. I was working, truly working, for the first time in weeks. I was designing a new digital brand for a local Black-owned business. I was focused. I was peaceful. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the caller ID. "Mr. Henderson?" I smiled and picked it up. "Mr. Henderson, I was just thinking about you." "Good thoughts, I hope." He laughed. His voice was warm. "I just wanted to give you the final update, Chani. The one I know you have been waiting for." "Oh." "I just got off the phone with the IRS investigator assigned to the case," he said. "They have officially frozen all assets belonging to Althea and Marcus. Every bank account, every stock their house. It is all locked down pending the criminal fraud and tax evasion charges." "Wow," I said softly. "It is really over." "And," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, "there is one more piece of news. They followed the money trail from your aunt's ledger, starting with that first tuition payment. They flagged it as the seed money for the entire extortion scheme." My breath caught. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "that because Jamal was the recipient of those funds and because he was an active part of the conspiracy, he was officially named as a co-conspirator. As of 9 this morning, the IRS has frozen his primary bank accounts too." The final loose end, the golden child, the one who had stood in this very room and told me I was trapped. He had not gotten away. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said, a feeling of pure light freedom washing over me. "Thank you for everything." "You did the hard work, Chani," he said. "You just needed the tools. Enjoy your life. You have earned it." We said goodbye, and I hung up the phone. It was over. Completely. I turned in my chair and looked at my desk. Next to my monitor, I had placed the small framed photo of Aunt Rosetta that used to sit on Mr. Henderson's desk. He had given it to me. She was smiling, her eyes bright and full of life and laughter. I reached out and lightly touched the glass. "I am free, Auntie," I whispered to the photo. "They are gone. You were right. You prepared me for everything. You gave me the weapons to save myself." I turned back to my work. A new design, a new idea, a new life. And for the first time I smiled. A real, genuine smile. And I got back to work. The greatest defense against those who try to define you with lies is to arm yourself with undeniable truth. This story teaches that while greed and deception can build a powerful illusion, it all shatters when confronted with cold, hard evidence. True strength isn't just surviving, it's having the courage to use the weapons, a contract, a ledger, a recording that those who truly loved you left behind. Real love doesn't just nurture, it protects and empowers you to win your own battles, even when that love is no longer physically present. Have you ever discovered a secret weapon from your past that gave you the strength to save your future? Have you ever had someone believe in you so much they protected you even when they were gone? I would love to hear your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe because you are stronger than you know.